Dominic Washington stood in the center of Nashville International Airport, surrounded by hundreds of bewildered passengers. Every Meridian Airlines flight displayed, grounded on the departure boards. The airline president's desperate voice echoed through his phone speaker, begging him to reconsider. Dominic's response was calm but resolute. "You should have thought about that before you called me, boy." Before we dive into this incredible story of power, discrimination, and justice, drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. Hit that like button and subscribe to see more stories of people who turn the tables on. Discrimination. Now let's rewind to see how this shocking airport showdown began. The day had started like any other for Dominic Washington. At 5:30 a.m., his alarm disrupted the peaceful silence of his penthouse apartment in downtown Nashville. He wasn't a man who needed multiple alarms or snooze buttons. Discipline had been ingrained in him since childhood. As he performed his morning routine with military precision, Dominic mentally reviewed his schedule for what would be a pivotal day. As the founder and CEO of Phoenix Technologies, one of the nation's fastest-growing cybersecurity firms, he had transformed a startup launched from his college dorm room into a billion-dollar enterprise that protected the digital assets of Fortune 500 companies and government agencies alike. Today's 2:00 p.m. meeting in Atlanta carried exceptional weight. Potential investors were prepared to inject $500 million into Phoenix's new artificial intelligence security division. This wasn't just another business meeting. It represented the culmination of 20 years of relentless work, countless sleepless nights, and battles against a system that had never made things easy for someone who looked like him. Dominic straightened his custom charcoal gray Tom Ford tie in the mirror. At 42, his athletic 6'2" frame remained as imposing as during his college basketball days. The subtle flecks of gray at his temples added an air of distinguished authority to his appearance. Every aspect of his presentation was deliberate. His wardrobe, speech pattern, and demeanor, all carefully calibrated to navigate the additional scrutiny he faced as a black man in the upper echelons of corporate America. The gentle ping of his phone interrupted his thoughts. His executive assistant, Aisha Johnson, had sent his revised itinerary. Schedule update. Your 10:45 a.m. flight from Nashville to Atlanta gives you a 90-minute buffer before the investor meeting. The Carrington Group specifically requested your presence, no substitutions. Need anything else before you leave? Dominic replied with a quick thumbs-up emoji. Aisha had been with him since Phoenix had just 30 employees, now managing the complex schedule of a CEO whose company employed over 3,000 people worldwide. As he packed his briefcase with the presentation materials, Dominic's mind drifted to previous travel experiences. Despite his success, despite the platinum credit cards and elite status with every airline and hotel chain, the pattern remained distressingly familiar. The random additional security screenings, first-class flight attendants assuming he was in the wrong seat, hotel staff addressing his white colleagues first even when he was clearly leading the group. Just last month at Chicago O'Hare, a flight attendant had repeatedly asked to see his boarding pass while white passengers streamed by unchallenged. 6 months before that in Dallas, he'd been pulled aside for a routine luggage check while hurrying to make a connection. Each incident minor in isolation. Death by 1,000 cuts when taken as a whole. Dominic's father, a factory worker who had never earned more than $40,000 in a year, had taught him to maintain his dignity without losing his temper. "They expect you to explode," he'd say. "That's how they justify treating you the way they do. Your calm is your power." As Dominic gathered his things, he glanced at the framed photograph on his dresser. His parents at his college graduation from MIT, their faces radiating pride. Neither had attended college themselves, but they'd mortgaged their modest South Side Chicago home to help finance his education after his scholarships fell short. His mother had worked double shifts as a hospital orderly to make up the difference. "Not today," Dominic muttered to himself as he closed his briefcase. Too much on the line today. He couldn't possibly know how prophetic those words would prove to be. Nashville International was relatively quiet for a Tuesday morning when Dominic's Tesla pulled up to the departures terminal at 9:15 a.m. He preferred arriving early for flights, a habit developed from years of allowing extra time to deal with potential complications that his white colleagues rarely encountered. The valet recognized him immediately. "Mr. Washington, good to see you again, sir. Heading out on business." "Atlanta today," Marcus Dominic replied, handing over his keys. He'd made it a point to remember the names of service staff. People who, like his parents, often went unnoticed by the wealthy and powerful. "I've got you covered. Have a good flight." Dominic nodded appreciatively. These small, respectful interactions were becoming more common as his face appeared more frequently in business publications and Sunday morning talk shows. Success had made him visible in a way that partially, though never completely, counteracted the invisibility that often came with being black in America. As he strode through the terminal, Dominic noticed the usual mixed reactions. Some recognized him. A few even surreptitiously took photos. Others automatically clutched their belongings closer as he passed, an unconscious reaction that never failed to register like a tiny electric shock to his system. The Meridian Airlines premium check-in counter had only one person ahead of him. While waiting, Dominic reviewed his presentation notes on his tablet. The Carrington Group was known for aggressive questioning, and he wanted to be prepared for any possible scenario. "Next, please." Dominic approached the counter where a ticket agent named Trevor, according to his nameplate, was tapping at his keyboard without making eye contact. "Good morning. Washington Dominic. First class to Atlanta on flight 1287. Trevor continued typing for several seconds before responding, his eyes never leaving the screen. "ID and confirmation number." Dominic presented his driver's license and pulled up the confirmation email on his phone. The booking clearly showed his Platinum Elite status and first-class seat assignment, 2A. Trevor's fingers clacked against the keyboard. His expression shifted subtly as he finally looked up at Dominic. "I'm showing a reservation, but there seems to be an issue with your ticket class." Dominic had heard this particular phrasing enough times to recognize it as the prelude to a problem. "What kind of issue? I booked first class directly through your app 3 weeks ago. The system is showing an economy class booking, not first class." Trevor's tone carried the artificial sympathy of someone reciting from a customer service script. "There might have been a computer error during your booking process." "I have the confirmation right here," Dominic said, keeping his voice measured as he turned his phone screen toward Trevor. "Seat 2A, first class." Trevor barely glanced at the phone. "Our system is the final authority on bookings, sir. There's nothing I can do about what your phone shows." Dominic took a deep breath. "I've been a Platinum Elite member with Meridian for 7 years. Can you check my status and see if there are any first-class seats available? First class is fully booked for this flight. I can offer you an economy seat." Trevor was already printing a boarding pass. "That's the best I can do." Dominic glanced at the departure screen overhead. "Flight 1287 to Atlanta first class, 3 seats available." "The board shows 3 open first-class seats," Dominic pointed out. Trevor followed his gaze to the screen and frowned. "That information isn't always up to date. Our system shows first class is full." As they spoke, Dominic noticed a white businessman approaching another check-in agent. He couldn't hear the entire conversation, but the phrases "seat upgrade" and "first available" were clear enough. Within minutes, the man walked away with a first-class boarding pass, smiling broadly. "I'd like to speak with your supervisor, please," Dominic said, his tone professional but firm. He'd learned long ago that displays of frustration, however justified, would only reinforce stereotypes and diminish his position. Trevor's mouth tightened almost imperceptibly. "That's unnecessary, but if you insist, please step aside while I assist other customers." Dominic moved to the side of the counter, watching as 3 more passengers were processed efficiently. Through the glass partition of the first-class lounge, he could see plenty of empty seats. His phone buzzed. A text from Aisha checking if he'd made it through security yet. "Not quite," he typed back. "Minor issue with the ticket. Handling it now." This was unfortunately all too routine. But Dominic Washington hadn't built a technology empire by backing down from obstacles. He would make his flight to Atlanta, and he would make that investor meeting. What he couldn't know was that this routine incident was about to become anything but. After 15 minutes of waiting, during which Trevor pointedly avoided eye contact while assisting other passengers, a woman in a Meridian Airlines blazer approached. Her nameplate identified her as Miranda Keller, Customer Service Supervisor. "Mr. Washington, I understand there's an issue with your booking." Dominic explained the situation calmly, showing her the confirmation email clearly displaying his first-class reservation. Miranda's expression remained neutral as she tapped at the computer terminal. "I see the confusion. While your confirmation shows first class, our system has you booked in economy. This happens sometimes when there's a glitch between the app and our main reservation system. Can you fix it?" Dominic asked. "I've been a loyal Meridian customer for years." "I'm afraid first class is completely booked for this flight," Miranda replied, echoing Trevor's earlier claim despite the departure board still showing available seats. "Perhaps you misunderstood what you were booking through the app." The suggestion that he, the CEO of a technology company, had somehow misunderstood a simple booking app was both condescending and transparent. Dominic had encountered this tactic before. The subtle implication that the problem was his comprehension, not their system or policies. "I didn't misunderstand anything," he stated firmly. "I've used your app dozens of times. My confirmation clearly shows first class, and your departure board shows available first-class seats." As they spoke, Dominic noticed a white woman approaching the counter with what appeared to be the same issue, a reservation discrepancy. Within moments, Miranda was nodding sympathetically and typing rapidly at her terminal. "We'll get this sorted right away, Mrs. Harrington. It looks like there was a system error, but we have plenty of room in first class. I'll just need to reissue your boarding pass." Dominic watched as the woman walked away with a new first-class boarding pass, thanking Miranda profusely. Several nearby passengers had also noticed the contrasting treatment, with a few exchanging uncomfortable glances. "It seems you were able to resolve a similar issue for that passenger," Dominic observed. Miranda's smile tightened. "Each situation is different, sir." "How exactly is her situation different from mine?" The direct question seemed to fluster Miranda momentarily. Well, she had a different type of booking." Dominic reached into his breast pocket and withdrew a business card, sliding it across the counter. Phoenix Technologies' distinctive logo sat above his name and title, Dominic Washington, Founder and Chief Executive Officer. "I need to be in Atlanta for a critical meeting this afternoon. As a Platinum Elite member who has spent over $50,000 on Meridian flights in the past year alone, I'd appreciate if you could find a solution rather than an excuse." Miranda's demeanor shifted slightly as she processed his title, but her response remained unchanged. "I understand your frustration, Mr. Washington, but there's nothing I can do about your seat assignment. The flight is boarding in 40 minutes. I suggest you either accept the economy seat or book with another airline." The second option was presented, knowing full well that finding another flight to Atlanta on short notice would be nearly impossible. It was a power play disguised as a solution. A small crowd of passengers had gathered nearby, some openly watching the interaction. Dominic was acutely aware of the optics. A black man arguing with airline staff could quickly be misinterpreted regardless of the circumstances. "I'd like to speak with the gate manager," Dominic said, maintaining his composure. Miranda's lips pressed into a thin line. "That won't change anything, but I'll call him." She picked up a phone, speaking in hushed tones. After a brief conversation, she replaced the receiver. "Mr. Bradley will be here shortly. In the meantime, I need to assist other passengers." As Miranda moved to another terminal, an elderly black woman who had been observing the interaction caught Dominic's eye and gave him a subtle nod of solidarity. It was a wordless communication that spoke volumes, the shared understanding of fighting battles that others couldn't see or refused to acknowledge. 5 minutes later, a tall man with thinning hair and a permanent scowl approached. His nameplate identified him as Bradley Thompson, gate manager. His body language, arms crossed, chin raised, projected authority and impatience. "What seems to be the problem here?" he asked, directing the question more to Miranda than to Dominic. Before Miranda could respond, Dominic stepped forward. "The problem is that I booked a first-class seat, have confirmation of that booking, yet your staff insists on giving me an economy seat while the board shows first-class availability. Meanwhile, I've watched as other passengers with similar issues have been promptly accommodated." Bradley barely glanced at Dominic's confirmation email. "Our system shows economy, sir. The app sometimes displays incorrect information." "That's quite a coincidence," Dominic replied evenly. "Does the app regularly make this particular error for passengers who look like me?" Bradley's face flushed. "Are you suggesting something inappropriate, sir?" "I'm stating a pattern of observation. I'm also stating that I can see 3 first-class seats available on your own display board, and I've watched your staff accommodate another passenger with the exact same issue not 5 minutes ago." By now, several other passengers had stopped to watch, some with phones discreetly recording the interaction. Bradley seemed to notice this, his eyes darting around nervously. "Look," Bradley lowered his voice, leaning slightly forward. "You people always want to make everything about race. The system shows what it shows. I've got a flight to manage and don't have time for this." The phrase, "you people," hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Several onlookers audibly gasped. Dominic didn't flinch, having heard variations of this phrase throughout his life. "I expect better from an airline I've loyally flown with for years," Dominic replied, his voice steady but firm. Bradley's patience was clearly wearing thin. "Sir, either take the economy seat or step aside. We're done here." "We're far from done," Dominic responded. "I'd like your employee ID number and the contact information for Meridian's corporate office." "You're holding up other passengers with these demands," Bradley snapped. "Take your boarding pass or move along, boy. I have a flight to prepare for." The terminal fell silent. That final word, "boy," carried centuries of degradation and disrespect. It was a term loaded with historical context that couldn't be mistaken for anything but intentional disrespect. Dominic's expression didn't change, though something shifted in his eyes. He had built his success on strategic thinking, on seeing 5 moves ahead, while others focused on the immediate. In that moment, a decision crystallized. He would make his meeting in Atlanta. But first, he had another matter to attend to. Have you ever faced discrimination but felt powerless to do anything about it? Or have you witnessed it happening to someone else? Comment 1 if you've experienced this personally, or 2 if you've seen it happen to others. Don't forget to hit that like button if you're invested in seeing how Dominic responds to this blatant disrespect. What would you do in Dominic's position? Would you accept the economy seat to make your important meeting, or would you stand your ground? And what could Dominic possibly do in just 14 minutes that would ground an entire airline? Let's find out what happens next. The word "boy" seemed to echo through the terminal, creating a moment frozen in time. Several passengers who had been pretending not to watch the confrontation now stared openly, their expressions ranging from shock to discomfort to indignation. An older black couple exchanged a knowing glance that contained volumes of shared history with that particular word. Bradley appeared to realize his mistake almost immediately, his face flushing as he registered the reactions of those around him. For a split second, fear flashed across his features. The modern fear of being recorded saying something career-endingly inappropriate, before his expression hardened back into defensive authority. "I meant no disrespect," he said stiffly, though the insincerity was palpable. "Now, as I said, we need to continue boarding other passengers." Dominic studied Bradley's face for a long moment, his own expression unreadable. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet, but clear enough to be heard by those nearby. 20 years ago, when I was starting my company, a potential investor called me that same word. He declined to fund my startup, suggesting I wasn't ready for that level of responsibility. Today, his company is one of our subsidiaries. The statement wasn't delivered as a threat, merely a fact. It hung in the air between them as Bradley's expression faltered slightly. "Is that supposed to impress me?" Bradley retorted, though his voice lacked its previous confidence. Not at all, Dominic replied calmly. It's simply context for what happens next. Without another word to Bradley, Dominic stepped away from the counter and took out his phone. As he walked toward the large windows overlooking the tarmac, he dialed a number from his favorites list. "He's calling his lawyer," Bradley snickered loudly enough for nearby passengers to hear, attempting to regain control of the narrative. Always the same with these troublemakers. Dominic didn't react to the comment as the call connected. "Elaine, it's Dominic. I need you to implement Protocol 27 immediately." "Yes, the full procedure. I'll explain later." Time is of the essence. The brevity and cryptic nature of the call didn't provide the dramatic scene that some onlookers might have expected from someone who had just been publicly humiliated. There was no shouting, no demands to speak to higher management, no threats of lawsuits that Bradley and Miranda clearly anticipated. Instead, Dominic simply ended the call, put his phone away, and took a seat in the waiting area. He opened his tablet and began reviewing documents as if nothing unusual had occurred. Bradley, who had been watching for Dominic's next move, seemed almost disappointed by this anticlimactic response. After a moment of uncertainty, he returned to the gate desk, exchanging a confused glance with Miranda. As Dominic sat reviewing his presentation for the Atlanta meeting, a young white woman approached him hesitantly. "Excuse me," she said. "I saw what happened. That was completely unacceptable, how they treated you. I'd be happy to be a witness if you need one." Dominic looked up, offering a genuine smile. "Thank you for your support. That's very kind. But it won't be necessary." "Are you sure?" she pressed. "I recorded part of it on my phone. When he called you, you know." "I appreciate that, truly. But please, save your battery." Dominic checked his watch. Things are about to get interesting around here. The woman seemed puzzled but nodded and returned to her seat. Moments later, a middle-aged black businessman approached, lowering his voice as he leaned closer to Dominic. "Brother, I've been in your shoes too many times. Whatever you need, testimony, corroboration, I'm here for you." "Thank you," Dominic responded, extending his hand. "But I've got this handled. Just keep an eye on the departure board in about... He checked his watch again. 8 minutes. The businessman seemed intrigued but didn't press further, returning to his seat with occasional glances toward Dominic. As the minutes ticked by, Bradley announced the pre-boarding process for first-class passengers of Meridian Flight 1287 to Atlanta. The irony wasn't lost on those who had witnessed the earlier confrontation. There was clearly room in first class after all. Dominic remained seated calmly, reviewing his documents, occasionally checking his watch. To the casual observer, he might have appeared to have accepted defeat. Those who had witnessed the confrontation, however, sensed something else entirely. The quiet confidence of someone who knew something others didn't. Exactly 14 minutes after Bradley had uttered the word "boy," it happened. The familiar chime of the airport announcement system sounded throughout the terminal, followed by an automated voice, "Attention Meridian Airlines passengers. We regret to inform you that all Meridian flights are currently experiencing delays. Please check the departure screens for updated information." Simultaneously, every Meridian departure listing on the screens throughout the terminal flashed from on time to delayed in bright red letters. The gate area erupted in groans and confused murmurs as passengers rushed to the counter demanding explanations. Bradley's phone began ringing almost immediately. His face drained of color as he answered it, turning away from the crowd of increasingly agitated travelers. "What do you mean, system-wide?" Bradley's voice carried, despite his attempt to speak quietly. "That's impossible. Without authorization from..." "Yes, I understand, but every flight nationwide." Dominic hadn't moved from his seat, but a subtle smile played at the corners of his mouth as he observed the chaos unfolding at the gate desk. Miranda was frantically typing at her terminal, while Bradley continued his increasingly panicked phone conversation. A fellow passenger sitting nearby leaned toward Dominic. "What's going on? Do you know something about these delays?" "Let's just say," Dominic replied quietly, "that actions have consequences. Sometimes immediately." As Bradley's call ended, he wiped sweat from his forehead and whispered urgently to Miranda. Both of them cast nervous glances in Dominic's direction. After a brief, intense conversation, Bradley approached Dominic, his previous arrogance replaced by visible anxiety. "Mr. Washington," he began, his voice significantly more respectful than before. "There seems to be some sort of technical issue affecting our flights. You wouldn't happen to know anything about that, would you?" Dominic looked up from his tablet with an expression of mild interest. Technical issues can be so disruptive, can't they? Perhaps almost as disruptive as discriminatory treatment of your customers. Bradley's face contorted with the effort of maintaining professionalism while clearly wanting to demand answers. "Sir, if you have any information about what's happening—" "I believe your phone is ringing again," Dominic interrupted calmly, nodding toward the desk, where Bradley's phone was indeed lighting up. As Bradley hurried back to answer it, Dominic returned to his tablet. The transformation was remarkable. The man who had been dismissively called boy minutes earlier now sat at the center of a storm that he appeared to have summoned with nothing more than a brief phone call. What would you do if you were in Dominic's position right now? Comment 1 if you think he's justified in whatever he's done to ground these flights, or 2 if you think he's gone too far. Has anyone ever underestimated you only to regret it later? Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe if you're enjoying this real-life power move. What could Dominic possibly have done to ground an entire airline's fleet nationwide with just one phone call? And how will Bradley react when he discovers exactly who he disrespected? Let's continue this incredible story. The terminal had transformed into a scene of barely controlled chaos. Passengers crowded the gate desks throughout the concourse, many holding phones, displaying social media feeds where number Meridian grounded was already trending. Gate agents appeared increasingly overwhelmed as they had no answers to provide beyond the official statement about technical difficulties. Dominic remained a calm island amid the storm, occasionally checking messages on his phone while continuing to review his presentation materials. He had shifted mental gears, compartmentalizing the unfolding situation to focus on his upcoming investor meeting. This ability to maintain focus amid chaos had served him well throughout his career, particularly during Phoenix Technology's turbulent early years. After finishing another tense phone call, Bradley wiped perspiration from his forehead and approached Dominic again, this time with Miranda following close behind. "Mr. Washington," Bradley began, his tone markedly different from their previous interaction. "Our regional director is trying to understand the nature of this system-wide disruption. He's asked me to inquire if your phone call earlier might be related." Dominic looked up with an expression of polite interest. "That's an interesting question." "Sir, please," Miranda interjected, her professional demeanor cracking under stress. "All Meridian flights nationwide are grounded. Thousands of passengers are affected. If you know something—" "I find it remarkable," Dominic interrupted smoothly, "how quickly concerns about discrimination become urgent when there are financial implications. The same issue that was dismissed as me playing the race card 15 minutes ago now seems worthy of your full attention." Bradley and Miranda exchanged uncomfortable glances. Around them, passengers continued to gather, many openly watching and listening to the exchange. Perhaps Dominic continued, "We should discuss what happened earlier. You claimed first class was full while your own systems showed availability. You accommodated a white passenger with an identical issue while denying me the same courtesy. And when I persisted, you resorted to racially charged language that has a long, ugly history in this country." Several onlookers nodded in agreement, a few even murmuring words of support. The public nature of the confrontation was clearly making Bradley increasingly uncomfortable. "Mr. Washington, I apologize if anything I said was interpreted as—" "Do not," Dominic cut in sharply, his calm facade cracking momentarily, attempt to minimize what happened with an "if you were offended" non-apology. "You called me boy, intentionally, and everyone here knows it." The terminal fell silent enough that the distant announcements from other gates could be heard clearly. Bradley's face flushed deep red as he struggled to formulate a response. Now Dominic continued, his composure restored, regarding your question about the system disruption. Let me share some information you might find relevant. He gestured for them to sit in the empty seats beside him, which they did reluctantly. Dominic lowered his voice, though several nearby passengers leaned in to listen. 3 years ago, Phoenix Technologies acquired a controlling interest in Nexus Digital Infrastructure, which provides cloud computing services to approximately 30% of the airline industry in North America. Bradley's expression remained confused, but Miranda's eyes widened with dawning comprehension. One of our largest clients, Dominic continued, is Meridian Airlines' parent company, Sky Alliance Group. Phoenix not only manages their entire digital reservation and operations systems, but also holds a 31% ownership stake in the company itself. The color drained from Bradley's face as the implications became clear. "You're," Bradley stammered. "A major shareholder," "Yes," Dominic confirmed, "as well as the CEO of the company that controls your entire digital infrastructure. I'm also a board member of Sky Alliance Group, with emergency powers related to system integrity and security." Miranda covered her mouth with her hand, her eyes darting between Dominic and Bradley. "Protocol 27, Dominic explained, is our emergency response to potential security threats within client systems. It initiates a controlled temporary shutdown of all digital operations pending executive review. It can only be authorized by 3 people in the entire organization. I happen to be one of them." The revelation hung in the air for several seconds before Bradley found his voice again. You deliberately grounded our airline because of a seating dispute." "No," Dominic corrected firmly. "I initiated Protocol 27 because a Meridian employee demonstrated blatant racial discrimination against a passenger, then used a historically racist slur when that passenger asserted his rights. That suggests a culture of discrimination that may extend beyond this isolated incident, a culture that Meridian's shareholders would certainly consider a significant liability." As this conversation unfolded, another Meridian employee rushed to the desk and whispered urgently to Miranda, who excused herself to answer a call on the gate phone. Her expression grew increasingly alarmed as she listened to whoever was on the line. "Mr. Bradley," she called, holding the receiver away from her mouth. "It's Mr. Parker. The president wants to speak with you immediately." Bradley nearly tripped over himself in his haste to reach the phone. "Jeffrey." "Yes, sir. I understand the severity." "No, sir. I don't know why." "Well, there was a situation with a passenger, but..." His voice trailed off. As he listened, his face growing paler by the second. After a moment, he extended the phone toward Dominic with a shaking hand. He wants to speak with you, Mr. Washington." Dominic rose unhurriedly and approached the desk, taking the phone while maintaining eye contact with Bradley. Rather than holding it privately to his ear, he pressed the speaker button so that those nearby could hear. "This is Dominic Washington." "Mr. Washington, this is Jeffrey Parker, president of Meridian Airlines." The voice on the speaker sounded tense and bewildered. "I'm told you might have information about the system-wide grounding of our fleet. We have over 300 aircraft currently unable to take off, costing us approximately $250,000 per minute." "I'm aware of the financial implications, Mr. Parker," Dominic replied calmly. "And yes, I do have information about the situation. In fact, I authorized it." There was a moment of stunned silence before Parker responded. "You authorized it? On what authority?" "As CEO of Phoenix Technologies, the company that manages your digital infrastructure, and as a board member of Sky Alliance Group with a 31% ownership stake, I initiated Protocol 27 following a disturbing incident of racial discrimination by your staff." Another silence, longer this time. "I see." Parker finally said, his tone carefully measured. "Perhaps you could elaborate on this incident." "I'd be happy to," Dominic responded. "But first, are you aware that this conversation is being broadcast on speakerphone in a crowded terminal with numerous passengers recording it on their phones? Given the sensitive nature of what occurred, you might prefer a private discussion." Parker cleared his throat. "I appreciate your discretion, Mr. Washington. However, if discrimination occurred within our airline, I believe transparency is appropriate. Please proceed." It was a calculated response, an attempt to appear committed to addressing the issue while putting Dominic on the spot to justify his drastic action publicly. Dominic recognized the tactic immediately, but was more than prepared. Very well. Dominic recounted the events in precise detail. The denial of his confirmed first-class seat, despite visible availability, the immediate accommodation of a white passenger with an identical issue, and Bradley's use of the word "boy" as a racial slur. Throughout the account, Parker remained silent. The gathered crowd of passengers, many now openly recording the exchange, listened intently. Bradley stared at the floor, while Miranda watched with an expression of growing horror as the full scope of the situation became clear. Mr. Washington Parker finally responded, his voice noticeably strained. "If what you've described is accurate, it represents a serious violation of Meridian's policies and values. I want to personally assure you that we will investigate this matter thoroughly." "With respect, Mr. Parker," Dominic countered, "promises of investigation are the standard corporate response when incidents like this become public. They rarely result in meaningful change." "What would you suggest?" Parker asked, a note of resignation creeping into his voice. Dominic's gaze swept over the crowd of passengers, the gate staff, and finally settled on Bradley, who still couldn't meet his eyes. "I have several specific conditions for the immediate resumption of Meridian's operations," he stated. "And given that every minute of delay costs your company $250,000, I suggest we discuss them promptly." The ball was now firmly in Dominic Washington's court, and everyone in the terminal knew it. The terminal had fallen into an expectant hush. Even passengers who had been angrily demanding information about their delayed flights now gathered around, sensing they were witnessing something extraordinary. Cell phones recorded from every angle as Dominic Washington, standing at the Meridian Airlines gate desk, held the fate of an entire national carrier in his hands. "My first condition," Dominic stated clearly into the speakerphone, "is an immediate and public acknowledgement from Meridian Airlines regarding the discriminatory treatment that occurred today, along with a genuine apology, not a carefully worded statement crafted by your legal department to minimize liability." Jeffrey Parker's sigh was audible through the speaker. "Agreed. I can issue that statement personally within the hour." Second, Dominic continued the immediate termination of both gate manager Bradley Thompson and ticket agent Trevor Mills for discriminatory practices and creating a hostile environment for passengers. Bradley's head snapped up, his face contorted with shock and outrage. "You can't just—" "Quiet, Miranda," hissed, grabbing his arm. There was a pause on the line before Parker responded. "Meridian has specific procedures for employee termination that include—" "Every minute you deliberate costs your company another $250,000, Mr. Parker," Dominic interjected smoothly. "And I should mention that social media is already flooded with passenger accounts of what transpired here. The hashtag number Meridian Grounded is trending nationally." This wasn't an exaggeration. Around the terminal, passengers were sharing videos of the confrontation, many tagging news outlets and adding commentary about witnessing discrimination firsthand. The story was spreading faster than any corporate communications team could hope to contain. "We can arrange for their immediate suspension pending review," Parker offered. "That's not sufficient," Dominic replied firmly. "Racial discrimination isn't a matter for prolonged internal review. It requires decisive action, particularly when witnessed by dozens of passengers. The evidence is unambiguous." Another pause, longer this time. "Very well," Parker finally conceded, tension evident in his voice. "Immediate termination." Bradley's face drained of all color. He opened his mouth to protest but seemed to think better of it, perhaps finally grasping the magnitude of his mistake. "My third condition," Dominic continued, "is the implementation of comprehensive anti-discrimination training for all Meridian Airline staff, from executives to ground crews, to be developed in consultation with respected civil rights organizations. This program should include specific modules on implicit bias recognition and cultural sensitivity. That would be a significant undertaking, Parker hedged. The logistics and expense of training our entire workforce would pale in comparison to the cost of keeping your fleet grounded, not to mention the potential class action lawsuits that could emerge if this incident represents a pattern of behavior within your company. Dominic completed the frenzim. Thought for him. I'm not asking for a token online training module, Mr. Parker. I'm talking about substantial, meaningful education that creates lasting change. The crowded terminal seemed to collectively hold its breath as Parker considered this demand. Agreed, he finally responded. We'll commit to developing and implementing such a program. With quarterly progress reports submitted to the Sky Alliance Group Board, Dominic added. Yes, with progress reports, Parker confirmed, sounding increasingly defeated. My final condition, Dominic said, is the establishment of a diversity and inclusion initiative within Meridian Airlines, including the creation of a senior executive position focused on equity and inclusion reporting directly to you, and a commitment to increasing diversity in your hiring practices at all levels. This was the most far-reaching demand, one that would require structural changes within the company, rather than just addressing the immediate incident. Around the terminal, passengers exchanged impressed glances, recognizing that Dominic was using his unexpected leverage to push for systemic change rather than personal compensation. Mr. Washington Parker began his tone cautious. While I appreciate your concern for these issues, creating new executive positions and restructuring our hiring practices would require board approval and significant. As a major shareholder and board member of your parent company, Dominic interrupted, I can assure you that board approval can be expedited. And again, every minute we debate costs your company another $250,000, while passengers across the country grow increasingly frustrated. The mathematical reality was undeniable. If the conversation continued much longer, the financial damage to Meridian would exceed the cost of implementing even the most ambitious diversity initiative. I'll need to consult with our executive team about the specifics, Parker said. You have 2 minutes to decide, Dominic replied calmly. After that, I'll be forced to conclude that Meridian Airlines is unwilling to address structural discrimination within its organization, and I'll need to reevaluate Phoenix Technologies' relationship with your company. Entirely. The threat was clear. Not just continued grounding of flights, but potentially the termination of the technological infrastructure that kept Meridian functioning at all. The 2 minutes that followed were perhaps the most expensive silence in Meridian Airlines history. Throughout the terminal, passengers and staff alike watched the digital departure boards, where every Meridian flight remained listed as delayed in glaring red letters. Some had pulled up financial news apps on their phones, noting that Meridian's stock price was already beginning to slide as news of the nationwide grounding spread. Mr. Washington Parker finally responded, on behalf of Meridian Airlines, I accept all of your conditions. I'll personally oversee their implementation and ensure they're executed with the seriousness they deserve. A ripple of reaction spread through the crowd, some nodding in approval, others appearing stunned by the unprecedented outcome. Thank you, Mr. Parker, Dominic replied. I appreciate your commitment. Now, regarding the current situation with your grounded flights. He glanced at his watch. His 10:45 a.m. flight to Atlanta was now significantly delayed, potentially jeopardizing his crucial investor meeting. I'll contact my CTO immediately to lift Protocol 27. Your system should be operational again within 30 minutes. 30 minutes, Parker exclaimed, the financial implications clearly racing through his mind. Digital security protocols can't simply be switched on and off like a light, Mr. Parker. The system requires a methodical restart to ensure operational integrity. However, Dominic paused, glancing pointedly at Bradley and Trevor, who stood nearby looking shell-shocked. I believe you have some immediate personnel matters to address in Nashville that might occupy those 30 minutes productively. Yes, of course, Parker replied quickly. Mr. Washington, I also want to personally apologize for the treatment you received today. It's inexcusable and in no way reflects Meridian's values. I'd like to offer you a complimentary upgrade to first class for your flight to Atlanta, along with our sincere apologies. Several passengers snickered at the offer of an upgrade to the first-class seat Dominic had already booked and paid for. "I'll accept the seat I originally purchased," Dominic replied evenly. "And I look forward to seeing meaningful changes within your organization." As the call ended, Miranda quickly printed a new boarding pass for Seat 2A First Class and handed it to Dominic with profuse apologies. Bradley and Trevor were discreetly escorted away by airport security, their employee badges collected before they disappeared down a service corridor. Dominic stepped away from the counter and made another brief call. Within minutes, the departure boards throughout the terminal began changing one by one, from delayed to boarding or on time, each update greeted with cheers from stranded passengers. As Dominic finally settled into his rightful first-class seat on the now boarding flight to Atlanta, his phone buzzed with a text message from Aisha. "Investors saw the number Meridian Grounded News. They're impressed. Said they've been looking for a CEO who stands his ground and drives systemic change. Meeting moved to 4 p.m. to accommodate your delay. You may have just turned a potential PR disaster into a $500M win." Dominic smiled slightly as he switched his phone to airplane mode. Sometimes standing up for what's right was also good business. As Dominic's flight taxied toward the runway, flight attendants performed their standard safety demonstrations with an unusual level of attentiveness. Word had spread quickly among the crew about what had transpired at the gate, and the first-class attendant had personally welcomed him aboard with a level of deference that bordered on reverence. "Mr. Washington, it's an honor to have you flying with us today," she'd said, leaning in slightly to add what you did back there. "Thank you." The sincere gratitude in her eyes suggested she might have her own stories of workplace discrimination that had gone unaddressed. It was a reminder that his actions potentially impacted more than just his own experience. As the plane accelerated down the runway, Dominic's phone vibrated in his pocket, a call coming through despite airplane mode being activated. This could only mean one thing: an override from Phoenix Technologies' proprietary communication system designed for emergency executive contact, regardless of standard connectivity restrictions. Glancing around to ensure he wasn't observed, Dominic discreetly checked the caller ID, Jeffrey Parker, Meridian Airlines president. With the plane now climbing steeply into the sky, Dominic made a quick calculation. FAA regulations prohibited phone calls during flight, but the Phoenix override system operated on a secure frequency that didn't interfere with aircraft communications. Still answering would technically violate airline policy, an irony not lost on him given the day's events. After a moment's consideration, he accepted the call, keeping his voice low and positioning his body toward the window to maintain privacy. "This is highly irregular, Mr. Parker," Dominic said by way of greeting. As is grounding an entire airline's fleet, Parker responded, his tone less deferential now that they were speaking privately. "I thought we should continue our conversation without an audience of recording passengers." The change in Parker's demeanor was telling, the public contrition giving way to a more confrontational approach once the cameras were off. "I'm listening," Dominic said simply. "Let's be frank, Mr. Washington. The conditions you demanded are extraordinarily far-reaching for what was essentially an isolated incident with a single employee who used inappropriate language." Dominic's grip tightened on the phone. "Is that how you characterize racial discrimination, Mr. Parker? An inappropriate language issue?" "That's not what I meant," Parker backpedaled slightly. "Obviously what happened was unacceptable. Bradley and Trevor have already been escorted from the premises. But the other demands, the company-wide training program, the new executive position, the hiring initiatives, these represent significant structural and financial commitments based on one incident." "One incident that I experienced personally," Dominic clarified. "But we both know it's rarely just one incident. How many similar situations have occurred with passengers who lacked the power to respond as I did? How many complaints have been filed and subsequently dismissed as misunderstandings?" There was a telling silence before Parker responded. "I'm calling to propose a compromise," Parker said finally. "We'll follow through on the public acknowledgement and the terminations. We'll even implement some form of enhanced training. but the executive position and hiring initiatives. Perhaps we could discuss a more gradual approach. The subtext was clear now that the immediate crisis was resolving. Meridian was seeking to walk back commitments made under duress. Mr. Parker, Dominic replied, his voice remaining steady despite his growing irritation. I want to be absolutely clear about something. I didn't leverage my position as a major shareholder and technology provider to extract concessions from Meridian Airlines. I used it to create accountability for discriminatory behavior and to initiate long overdue systemic changes. And we appreciate your concern for these issues. I'm not finished, Dominic interrupted. My phone has been buzzing continuously for the past hour with notifications. Number Meridian Grounded isn't just trending anymore, it's dominating social media. News outlets are picking up the story. Passengers from your airline are sharing their own experiences with discrimination on your flights. This isn't going away with a press release and a couple of terminations. Through his window, Dominic could see the plane had reached its cruising altitude, the sprawl of Nashville now replaced by an endless carpet of clouds. Somewhere below, the repercussions of this morning's confrontation continued to spread. Furthermore, he continued, I've already been contacted by 3 civil rights organizations offering to assist with the development of the training program we discussed. Several diversity and inclusion executives from Fortune 100 companies have reached out, expressing interest in the new position at Meridian. The business community is watching closely to see if your commitment to addressing discrimination is genuine or merely performative. Parker's sigh was audible through the phone. You've painted us into quite a corner, Mr. Washington. No, Mr. Parker. Your employee did that when he called me boy, and your company's culture enabled it. I'm simply ensuring there are consequences beyond an empty apology. After a moment of silence, Parker's tone shifted again. The corporate negotiator giving way to something more personal and perhaps more genuine. Can I speak frankly, not as Meridian's president, but just as one executive to another? Please do, Dominic replied. I've been with this airline for 22 years. Worked my way up from operations management. In all that time, I've told myself we were doing right by our employees and passengers regardless of their background. We have diversity statements, inclusion policies, all the standard corporate commitments. Parker paused, seeming to choose his next words carefully. But what happened to you today? And the reaction across social media suggesting it's not an isolated case, that indicates a disconnect between our stated values and the reality. I don't want to lead a company where people are treated the way you were treated. Not just because it's bad business, but because it's wrong. The sincerity in Parker's voice was unexpected, catching Dominic slightly off guard. So what are you saying, Mr. Parker? I'm saying that I'm personally committed to implementing every condition you outlined, not grudgingly or gradually, but comprehensively and immediately. Not because I was forced to by circumstances, but because it's the right thing to do. I'll be announcing the new executive search next week and establishing a timeline for the training program within the month. Now, it was Dominic's turn to be silent as he processed this apparent change of heart. I appreciate that commitment, Mr. Parker, but you understand that I'll be watching closely to ensure it's fulfilled. I would expect nothing less, Parker replied. And I'd actually like to request your input as we develop these initiatives. Your perspective would be valuable. I'd be willing to consult in an advisory capacity, Dominic agreed cautiously. Thank you, Parker said. One last thing. We're issuing a public statement about today's events within the hour. With your permission, I'd like to mention that we're working with you to improve our practices rather than positioning you as an adversary. Dominic considered this request carefully. Being publicly aligned with Meridian's response carried both opportunities and risks. You can mention our collaboration on the initiatives going forward, he decided, but the statement must clearly acknowledge the discriminatory treatment that occurred without qualification or excuse. Understood, Parker agreed. And Mr. Washington, for what it's worth, I am truly sorry about what happened today. As the call ended, Dominic stared out at the endless sky, reflecting on the unexpected turns the day had taken. What had begun as yet another instance of the discrimination he'd faced throughout his life had transformed into an opportunity to drive meaningful change at an institutional level. His phone vibrated with a text from Aisha. Just saw Meridian stock is starting to recover as flights resume. News outlets requesting interviews with you. How do you want to handle? Dominic texted back, no interviews for now. Focus on Atlanta meeting. This isn't about me. It's about fixing a broken system. He tucked his phone away and closed his eyes, mentally preparing for his investor presentation. There would be time for interviews and public statements later. For now, he had accomplished something significant. Not just standing up for himself, but potentially improving conditions for countless others who traveled Meridian's routes. The flight attendant approached with a coffee service, handling his cup with a noticeable reverence. "Mr. Washington," she said quietly, "I just wanted to say, I've worked for Meridian for 12 years. What you did today, it's going to change things for a lot of us. Thank you." Dominic nodded in acknowledgement, recognizing that the day's events had resonances beyond what he could fully comprehend. The real measure of success wouldn't be in the headlines or social media trending topics, but in the experiences of passengers and employees in the months and years to come. Exactly 37 minutes after Dominic's flight departed, Nashville Meridian Airlines issued its official statement across all platforms. The message was notably devoid of the corporate doublespeak and passive voice that typically characterized such communications. This morning at Nashville International Airport, a Meridian Airlines passenger was subjected to discriminatory treatment, including racial slurs, by our staff. This behavior violated our stated values, and more importantly, basic human dignity. We offer our unreserved apology to the passenger involved and to all our customers. Effective immediately, the employees responsible have been terminated. Additionally, Meridian Airlines is implementing comprehensive anti-discrimination training for all staff and establishing a new executive position focused on diversity, equity, and inclusion, reporting directly to the President. We are working with civil rights organizations and with Dominic Washington, CEO of Phoenix Technologies, to develop these initiatives. The brief system disruption experienced this morning has been resolved, with all flights resuming normal operations. We thank our passengers for their patience and understanding. The statement was accompanied by a video message from Jeffrey Parker himself, reiterating the points with a gravity that suggested genuine remorse rather than damage control. Within the hour, the story had been picked up by major news outlets. Financial analysts scrambled to explain the connection between Phoenix Technologies and Meridian Airlines, some praising Dominic's leveraging of corporate power for social justice, others questioning whether such drastic measures were warranted. On social media, the narrative had evolved from number Meridian grounded to number corporate accountability, with many users sharing their own experiences of discrimination in travel and other consumer contexts. Several civil rights leaders issued statements commending the concrete steps promised by Meridian, while emphasizing the need for sustained commitment beyond the initial response. As Dominic's flight approached Atlanta, the flight attendant seemed to move with a new awareness, checking on passengers of all backgrounds with equal attentiveness. The racial dynamics of air travel, typically invisible to those who didn't experience discrimination directly, had suddenly become a topic of national conversation. When the plane touched down at Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport, Dominic was surprised to find a Meridian customer service representative waiting for him at the gate. "Mr. Washington," the young woman greeted him with genuine warmth. "I'm Keisha Barnes, Senior Customer Relations Specialist. Mr. Parker asked me to personally escort you to your connection and ensure you have everything you need during your time in Atlanta." Dominic assessed Keisha, noting her professional demeanor and the absence of the forced deference that sometimes characterized interactions after the Nashville incident. "Thank you, Miss Barnes, but that won't be necessary. I know my way around Hartsfield-Jackson quite well." "Of course, sir. May I at least assist with your luggage to the terminal train?" "I only have this carry-on," Dominic replied, gesturing to his compact travel bag, "but I appreciate Meridian's attention to customer service." Keisha smiled, understanding the subtle point he was making. If I may speak candidly, Mr. Washington, what happened in Nashville has sparked important conversations among staff across the entire airline today. Many of us have experienced or witnessed similar situations, but felt powerless to address them. Your actions, they've given us hope that change is possible. This perspective, from someone within the organization, added a dimension to the day's events that Dominic hadn't fully considered. Thank you for sharing that, Ms. Barnes. Change is indeed possible, but it requires commitment at every level, not just executive mandates. Absolutely, she agreed. There's a group of us already organizing to provide input for the new training program, highlighting real experiences and challenges faced by staff of color. This organic employee response was perhaps the most promising sign yet that the day's events might lead to sustainable change rather than superficial compliance. That's excellent, Dominic said sincerely. Make sure your voices are heard in this process. As Keisha escorted him to the terminal exit, Dominic checked his messages. Aisha had confirmed his car was waiting to take him to the investor meeting, which had indeed been pushed to 4:00 p.m. to accommodate his delayed arrival. She'd also forwarded an email from Jeffrey Parker to the Sky Alliance Group board outlining in detail the steps Meridian would be taking to address discrimination with implementation timelines and accountability measures. Parker had copied Dominic directly, an unusual move that signaled his commitment to transparency in the process. Another message caught Dominic's attention. From Trevor, the ticket agent who had initiated the morning's events. Mr. Washington, I've been terminated from Meridian Airlines, a consequence I fully accept. I want to apologize for my role in what happened today. Working in customer service, I've developed unconscious biases I didn't recognize until forced to confront them. I'm not asking for forgiveness or reinstatement, only acknowledging my failure and committing to do better. Thank you for bringing these issues into the light. The message was unexpected, a personal acknowledgement rather than a defensive justification. Dominic decided to respond briefly. Accountability is the first step toward growth. I hope today serves as a catalyst for reflection and change, not just for you personally, but for the systems that enable such behaviors. I wish you well on that journey. As Dominic exited the terminal and approached his waiting car, several travelers recognized him from social media coverage of the morning's events. A few nodded respectfully or offered thumbs-up gestures. One older black man in an airport service uniform actually stood straighter as Dominic passed, offering what almost resembled a salute, a gesture of recognition between generations that needed no words. In the car, heading toward downtown Atlanta, Dominic finally had a moment to process the whirlwind of the day's events. What had begun as yet another instance of the discrimination he'd faced throughout his life had catalyzed potentially significant changes within a major corporation. More importantly, it had sparked conversations about racial dynamics in spaces where such discussions were typically avoided. His phone buzzed with a notification. Meridian Airlines had just announced the formation of a Passenger and Employee Equity Advisory Council, with representatives from civil rights organizations and diversity experts to guide their transformation efforts. They were accepting applications from passengers with relevant experience or expertise. It was a start, not a solution, but a genuine beginning. As the Atlanta skyline came into view, Dominic shifted his focus to the upcoming investor meeting. The $500 million that had seemed so crucial this morning still mattered greatly to Phoenix Technologies' future, but the day's events had provided a powerful reminder of why he had built the company in the first place: to create systems that worked for everyone, not just those with privilege. With renewed clarity and purpose, Dominic Washington prepared to walk into the Carrington Group meeting not just as a CEO seeking investment, but as a leader who had demonstrated the courage of his convictions in a moment of challenge. Sometimes standing up for what was right wasn't just the moral choice, it was also good business. 1 month later, Dominic Washington stood at a podium in Meridian Airlines corporate headquarters in Atlanta. Behind him, a banner displayed the company's newly adopted slogan, "Elevating Equality, Soaring Together." The audience consisted of Meridian executives, staff, representatives from across the organization, civil rights leaders, and members of the press. Good morning, Dominic began surveying the diverse faces before him. A month ago, I experienced something that many travelers of color know all too well. Being treated differently because of my appearance rather than my character or contributions. What made my experience unusual wasn't that it occurred, but that I was in a position to demand accountability. He paused, letting the weight of that reality settle among the attendees. Today marks the official launch of Meridian's comprehensive anti-discrimination training program, developed in collaboration with the National Coalition for Civil Rights, the Equal Justice Initiative, and Phoenix Technologies' own diversity consultants. This program isn't about checking boxes or avoiding PR disasters. It's about transforming a corporate culture from the inside out. The journey to this moment had been intense and productive. Following the Nashville incident, Dominic's Atlanta meeting with the Carrington Group had proceeded better than he could have anticipated. Rather than being put off by the morning's events, the investors had been impressed by his principled stand and strategic leveraging of his position. "We're looking to invest in leaders who drive systemic change, not just quarterly profits," the head of the investment committee had told him. "Your actions today demonstrated exactly the kind of courageous leadership we want to support." The $500 million investment had been secured with the Carrington Group, specifically allocating additional funds for Phoenix Technologies' corporate responsibility initiatives. Meanwhile, Meridian Airlines had moved with surprising speed to implement the changes Dominic had demanded. Jeffrey Parker had proven true to his word, appointing Dr. Renee Lockhart, a respected organizational psychologist specializing in workplace diversity, as the new Executive Vice President of Equity and Inclusion within 2 weeks of the incident. "The training program we're launching today," Dominic continued, "has several components that distinguish it from typical corporate diversity initiatives. First, it's informed by real experiences from both passengers and employees. Second, it includes specific metrics for measuring improvement, not just completion. And third, it's integrated into promotion criteria and performance evaluations at every level of the organization." The audience nodded approvingly, particularly the Meridian employees who had contributed their experiences to the program's development. "But training alone isn't enough," Dominic emphasized. "That's why Meridian is also implementing structural changes to address the conditions that allow discrimination to persist." He gestured to a slide displaying Meridian's new accountability framework, which included quarterly equity audits, anonymous reporting channels for employees and passengers, and transparent tracking of discrimination complaints and resolutions. As Dominic continued his presentation, his thoughts briefly returned to Bradley and Trevor, the employees whose actions had precipitated these changes. While Bradley had disappeared from public view, issuing only a terse statement through an attorney, Trevor had taken a different path. 3 weeks after the incident, Trevor had published a thoughtful essay on a major news platform titled, "How I Became the Face of Corporate Discrimination and What I'm Learning." In it, he candidly described the subtle ways bias had shaped his customer service approach and his journey toward recognizing and addressing these patterns. The piece had gone viral, with many praising his willingness to accept responsibility and commit to growth rather than defensiveness. One of the most significant initiatives launching today, Dominic announced, returning to the present moment, is the Meridian Diversity in Aviation Scholarship, which will provide full funding for 20 students of color annually to pursue careers in aviation, aerospace engineering, and airline management. This program represents Meridian's commitment not just to addressing current inequities, but to transforming the industry's future. What Dominic didn't mention was that he had personally contributed $1 million to the scholarship fund, matching Meridian's initial investment. He preferred to keep the focus on systemic change rather than individual generosity. As the presentation concluded, Jeffrey Parker joined Dominic at the podium. "Thank you, Mr. Washington, not just for your insights today, but for holding us accountable when we failed to live up to our own stated values," Parker acknowledged publicly. What began as a deeply regrettable incident has catalyzed meaningful change throughout our organization. We have a long way to go, but we're committed to this journey. The sincerity in Parker's voice suggested that the past month had indeed prompted genuine reflection rather than mere damage control. The metrics supported this impression. Passenger complaints related to discriminatory treatment had decreased by 37% in just the first month of implementing new protocols, while employee satisfaction scores among staff of color had risen significantly. Following the formal presentation, Dominic mingled with attendees particularly interested in hearing from Meridian employees about their experiences with the changes thus far. "The difference is real," confided a black flight attendant who had been with the airline for 15 years. Before, reporting discrimination meant risking being labeled difficult or oversensitive. Now our concerns are taken seriously. It's like we can finally breathe. Another employee, a gate agent of South Asian descent, shared a similar perspective. "Last week, a supervisor interrupted a passenger who was berating me with racial slurs. That would never have happened before. They would have just moved me to another position to de-escalate while the passenger faced no consequences." These individual testimonials, more than the corporate metrics or media coverage, affirmed for Dominic that his actions had made a tangible difference in people's daily experiences. As the event concluded, Dominic prepared to board another Meridian flight, this time to San Francisco for a tech conference. The experience at the gate couldn't have been more different from that fateful day in Nashville. The staff were professionally courteous to all passengers with no discernible differences in how travelers of various backgrounds were treated. When Dominic presented his boarding pass, the gate agent, a young Latino man named Carlos, according to his nameplate, smiled with genuine warmth, rather than the nervous deference that had sometimes followed the Nashville incident. "Thank you for flying with us today, Mr. Washington," Carlos said, simply treating him with the same respect afforded to any first-class passenger. No more, no less. It was precisely the normal, dignified interaction that Dominic had sought that day in Nashville. As Dominic settled into his seat, he reflected on how a moment of discrimination had transformed into a catalyst for change. The incident had become a case study in business ethics classes at several major universities, examining the intersection of corporate power, personal dignity, and social responsibility. Phoenix Technologies had experienced unexpected benefits as well. Applications from diverse candidates had increased by over 200%, and several major corporations had approached them about developing similar training programs for their own organizations. Dominic opened his tablet to review notes for his upcoming conference presentation titled "Technology as an Equalizer Building Systems That Work for Everyone." As the plane taxied toward the runway, a flight attendant approached with a discreet envelope. "Mr. Washington, Captain Reynolds asked me to deliver this to you." Inside was a handwritten note. "I was inspired to pursue my pilot's license after seeing my mother, a flight attendant, face discrimination throughout her career with no recourse. Today, I'm Meridian's youngest black female captain, and I want to thank you for helping create an airline where others like me might face fewer barriers. It's an honor to fly you to San Francisco today." It was signed Captain Jasmine Reynolds, with a small drawing of wings beneath her name. Dominic tucked the note carefully into his jacket pocket. The real measure of success wasn't in policy documents or press releases, but in the lived experiences of people like Captain Reynolds, and in the opportunities now opening for those who would follow her path. As the plane lifted off, Dominic gazed out at the vast horizon. True respect wasn't given out of fear of power, but from recognition of shared humanity. Today's flight was proof that both were possible when those with influence chose to use it for positive change. What do you think about how Dominic handled this situation? Was he justified in using his corporate power to drive change, or did he go too far? Have you ever witnessed or experienced discrimination and wished you had the power to make real change? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video if you found Dominic's story inspiring. Subscribe to our channel for more powerful true stories of justice and transformation. and share this video with someone who needs to be reminded that standing up against discrimination can create ripples of positive change far beyond one moment or incident. Thank you for watching, and remember, sometimes the most powerful response to discrimination isn't anger, but strategic action that creates lasting change. Dominic Washington's story teaches us that true power lies not just in wealth or position, but in how we choose to use our influence when faced with injustice. While most people experiencing discrimination lack the leverage to create immediate change, everyone can contribute to systemic transformation through persistent advocacy and strategic action. The incident demonstrates how racial bias remains embedded in everyday interactions, often dismissed as isolated incidents until patterns emerge. Importantly, Dominic didn't just seek personal vindication. He demanded structural reforms that would benefit countless others. His approach balanced righteous anger with calculated strategy, achieving more through calm determination than explosive rage could have accomplished. The story also highlights how institutions often respond to discrimination only when it affects their bottom line, underscoring the need for economic consequences to drive meaningful change. Ultimately, the greatest lesson is that confronting discrimination effectively requires both individual courage and collective accountability, with success measured not by public apologies, but by transformed experiences for those most vulnerable to prejudice. What discrimination have you witnessed or experienced, and how did you respond? Was there a time you wished you had more power to create change? Share your story in the comments below. If this account of standing up against racism resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more powerful stories of justice and transformation. Don't forget to share this video with someone who needs inspiration to confront injustice in their own life. Together we can build a world where respect comes from recognizing shared humanity, not from fear of consequences. Thank you for watching, and remember, sometimes a single moment of courage can create ripples of change that transform entire systems.